Hello, everyone, and welcome to For Attention, an intimate look at LGBTQ plus self-harm and suicide. My name is Kyle. I am a writer, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a podcaster, and I am someone who struggles with mental health issues like depression, suicidal ideation, self-harm, which is part of why we are putting on this event tonight. By my watch, we are starting only a few minutes late, which by gay time I think is still pretty early, so happy about that. So I wanted to, it's a weird feeling being excited to have this conversation because it is a heavy, important, dark, scary, life-threatening issue that we're talking about here. I'm excited because I think we need to do this more and destigmatize conversations about self-harm and suicide more. And what I'm excited about is that we have 4 amazing panelists that are willing to do that with me, to share their experiences. I'm excited that people are joining to watch, to listen, to learn about it. And our community, we go through so much every day, and coming together for just an event like this does warm my cold gay heart a little bit, so I appreciate it. So first of all, I'm going to share more about my story a little bit later in the form of a documentary, but I do and have struggled with issues of depression and self-harm, and at my lowest, I often felt alone. People did not talk about this. I didn't know how to understand what I was feeling or what I was going through, and it felt very hopeless. So one of my biggest goals through this event is to talk to those who are in that same experience, the people that I think about, the people that are in it right now. You know what that means, you know if that's you know how that feels. So do a lot of us. And that's what I want you to know, is that you are not alone. There are a lot of us that go through this experience, and I just want to thank you for joining, for listening, because there may be something in here that you learn. There may be someone's experiences that you resonate with, and you don't have to do this alone. And we can be here for you, we can help you, and you can get through it. It is still difficult. I think I see numbers posted a lot on social media about self-harm, and quite often it's just the numbers that I see. I don't as often hear about people explaining for them, what is it? What does it feel like? What do they do? And there are so many different experiences that I hope you can take something away from this. Biggest thing is you are not alone in this. I also know that there may be people watching who don't have these experiences, who don't know what it feels like to experience self-harm, to have suicidal thoughts, to have attempted suicide, and I really appreciate you being willing to learn. Odds are, if you know at least a few gay people, you know someone who has struggled with this, whether they've told you about it or not. So the fact that you are here, the fact that you want to understand, means that you'll be better equipped to help other people in the world, whether that's talking to other people who have misconceptions, whether that's when one of your friends sits down with you and shares with you that they've been going through these things. I hope you're better equipped to help them and help our community. So first, I wanted to show you some of the resources that we may show multiple times during this, the Trevor Project and the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I'm sure that people out there have seen some of these resources posted online, and I bring them up as someone who has gone through this. Sometimes I see those posted and I think this is worthless to me. I get that feeling. There are ways that you can engage with places like the Trevor Project, who helps LGBT youth with suicide and self-harm. There are ways to contact them that include texting, that include chatting online, or a phone call, that can make taking the first step of talking to someone about this a little bit easier. So even if you don't think that it's going to help, even if you don't think anything can help, I want to encourage you to look at those numbers again and make a text. Texting is, at least for me, low risk way to take a step and engage and reach out. So those are some resources that everyone has available to them if needed. I want everyone to take care of themselves first and foremost. Even if you are a friend of mine that said you'd watch, listening to how you're feeling during this and making the decision of if it's right for you to be watching this right now, if it's helpful to you, you are welcome to, if you're watching it later, pause if you need to and step away. So what we'll be doing tonight, I'm going to give us a little bit of just framework education on the scope of the issue that we're talking about, and a few definitions just because I think it's helpful. I didn't know about all the different kind of things that I was dealing with in my head, so a few definitions will help us get started. But then we'll quickly turn it over to a panelist conversation that I will be moderating. You'll get to hear from a lot of amazing people. That'll be the first half is our conversation. The second half, I will be screening a documentary that I made that goes into my own personal experiences, and then I will have a Q&A afterwards with my podcast co-host and friend, Mike, who is right now behind the controls, making sure everything works and shows up for you on Facebook Live. Just so you know, I may not be able to look at or read the comments on Facebook Live, so I may not be able to engage with those, just so you're aware. So I mentioned the numbers that we see, and I don't want to get too into them, but at least for someone who may be new to or wanting to learn about self-harm and suicide, the numbers tend to say anywhere from 40 to 50% of LGBTQ youth, and I would assume that that number could be closely extrapolated to the LGBTQ community more broadly, but the numbers say LGBTQ youth experience engage in self-harm. Almost 50% of them do. Almost 50% of LGBTQ youth have seriously considered suicide in the past year. And I see those numbers so often, but when you really sit down and think about if you talk to two young queer people, odds are one of them is actively struggling with this right now. It blows my mind. This is a giant issue, and the disproportionate, the small amount that we talk about it is wild to me, considering those numbers. And compared to their peers, 4 times more likely to have considered attempting suicide. So that is why we are talking. This affects our community right now, and we need to do more to address it and help others. Another thing I want to talk a little bit about are just some of the definitions of these for those who may not know. For self-harm, if you're unaware of kind of what self-harm is, or maybe even why someone might do it, I think it does help to understand that we all do a lot of things that are not, we know they're not the right thing for us, for our mental health, for us. It may be going out and drinking, it may be smoking a pack of cigarettes, it may be not moving on the couch. There are a lot of things that we may do that we know hurt us, we know are not what our therapist would recommend. So there is kind of a more broad idea of self-harm, of things, destructive things we may do to ourselves. Most often when I say self-harm, I'm going to talk more specifically about something physical that we are doing to injure ourselves. The most common thing that people often think about is cutting, but there are far more. Everyone has a unique experience, and there are far more things that fall under that umbrella. I don't want to get too far into it to talk about too many specifics, but there are other things that you may not think of, like not letting a wound heal, throwing a body part against a wall, that are included in self-harm. So it may not be exactly what you think about, or if you've seen a TV show, what you've seen in TV. For suicide, I know that I did not understand my suicidal thoughts at first, and what helped me is learning the difference between suicidal ideation or more passive suicidal thoughts versus the ones that are more active. So suicidal ideation can be the thought of suicide that comes into your head. It may not be that you want to die. It may not be that you want to take your life, but it's a thought that jumps into your head, and it is distressing and it's harmful and it's dangerous, but it's very different than actively either attempting or making a plan to attempt to commit suicide. Similarly, self-harm does not necessarily mean that you actively want to commit suicide. For some people, those may be connected or related. For others, they have nothing to do with each other. It is not at all about that. So again, that's part of the reason that some of these personal conversations and stories are so important, because you may not resonate with everything or everyone, but when you find that one other person that has dealt with this before, I think there's something so valuable to know that there is someone who's gone through this, who's struggled with it, and may have ideas or may have help for you. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists. So, welcome to the panelists. I'm going to start with introductions and ask a little bit about you all, and then we'll get into our conversation. But I'll start with Pangina Heals. So welcome, Pangina. Great to have you.
I'm very excited to be here. I think it's a very important conversation that we're having, something very taboo. Not a lot, a lot of people talk about it. And I hopefully that my experiences can shed a light on this and kind of make the dark a little bit brighter.
I love that. I appreciate that. Pangina Heals is a drag queen and judge on RuPaul's Drag Race Thailand, often described as one of the most popular drag performers in Asia, and he founded the Bangkok drag venue House of Heels. And Pangina, I recently saw an Instagram story where you were out performing and trying to help promote marriage equality for Thailand. Can you tell me a little bit about that advocacy work you do through drag?
Well, I feel like with drag, or if you have a voice or any kind of platform, for me personally, it's a responsibility to try to make the world a better place in its most naive form. And in Thailand, with the current shitty government, we are basically trying to speak up, and they're trying to silence us. And I feel like, you know, everyone has a voice, and it's so powerful. And just to be quiet, it's not enough for me. So Thailand, people think of it as the most open place in the world. Everyone comes from all over the world to come because it's so gay and open and friendly, but we're not protected under the law. We don't have marriage equality. I mean, we don't have, we can't get married in Thailand. So I was like, what's more of a bigger fuck you than dressing up in drag and stopping traffic? Because that's like literally the main road of Thailand. So we did that, and we tried to create awareness.
I will show everyone's socials a little bit later, but you follow Pangina on Instagrams for both some great drag and some great advocacy. So thank you, Pangina. Brock, next. Brock McGillis is a former OHL and professional hockey player, having played professionally both in the US and Europe, and the first male professional hockey player to openly come out as gay. So welcome, Brock. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You do what I could never, which is play a sport. But beyond that, I tried to.
You could play a sport.
I tried to tackle people in junior high, but it didn't. I didn't know what I was doing.
You said you did drag twice. That's a sport.
That was harder than. No. Trying to play defensive end was harder. I was lying. It seems to me that we're getting kind of this wave of people coming out in professional sports. Do you see the tide shifting in professional sport, including you? You are one of these big milestones. Do you see the tide shifting for sports?
Yeah, I'm starting to feel like an OG. Like now all these people are coming out, and I'm like, oh, I'm the old one. I'm like old news. Sadly, I don't. I feel like it's almost like what Pangina is saying, like the culture of certain areas, right? And you look at men's team sport culture, especially being one of those areas that's incredibly hypermasculine and seen and in a lot of cases homophobic in terms of language and behaviors, and also heterosexist, and it leads to people staying closeted. I think the people who have come out recently have done so in spite of the culture, not because of it.
Interesting.
Almost like doing drag in middle of the busiest street in Bangkok.
Speaking of drag, I want to introduce our next panelist, Adam Wall. Adam is self-described a novice gay and average drag queen. Donna Suggarz, a advanced nerd. I like the various labels where you believe you excel is the nerd and hardcore gamer portion, and he's host of the Donna Suggarz Show podcast. So welcome, Adam. Thank you for joining.
Hi. Hello.
You are not currently in drag, but just so we can get a little taste, can you tell us a little bit about Donna Suggarz?
Donna Suggarz is a clown. Donna Suggarz is very conceptual because Donna Suggarz comes out when it's necessary, but for the most part, you're talking to Donna Suggarz. No, I found drag as a very healing thing for me when I was in a very destructive place in my life. So drag became a way of me being the person that I always wanted to be. So Donna Suggarz is very loud. She's very vivacious. She loves her body. And the more I did it, the more I felt comfortable as Adam. So Donna Suggarz is really just kind of a joke. I mean, she's really, it's about having fun and not laughing at your, like not being so serious all the time. So, and I'm also a huge nerd. So, I mean, give me a chance to play a video game, Dungeons and Dragons, like, girl, the game table's right there. Like, roll for initiative. Let's do it. Like, it's just kind of my life and kind of fitting in where I see I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we have Mason Taylor. Welcome, Mason. Thank you for being here.
Hello. Thank you.
Mason is a paralegal by day, a podcaster, and poet by night. Their work focuses on the intersections of disability, mental health, being non-binary, and queer. And Mason, you mentioned being a podcaster, and I saw your podcast, Ex-Gay and Other Lies the Church Told Me. I'm curious, what made you start that podcast, and what can people expect once they dive in?
So it was like right around the 10-year mark of when I was in conversion therapy, and then the pastor was like, "Hey, how are you?" And I was like, "Well, nope. I'm just gonna tell everybody about you instead." So
that's amazing. That's something more of us need to hear about. So thank you to all the panelists. Welcome. It's interesting because I want people to know we are going to mostly talk about self-harm and suicide. There's a lot of things that we are that you're seeing a very specific part of who we are. So let's get into it. You all are here. You all are sharing your stories. So I want to ask each of you, when did you first decide to start talking about this, and why did you make that decision?
Any of us, or do you want somebody to?
Brock, you're talking. Why don't you go first?
All right. I hate awkward silences, so I was like, I guess I'm jumping in here.
Go for it, please.
I told my family and stuff a little bit about it while I was struggling, but I sort of was thrust into speaking about it. I never intended to, and in fact, I never thought I'd come out publicly and become an activist and speaker and travel the world and do the work I do in terms of public speaking and that type of thing. And I wrote an article coming out publicly, and after I did, I started getting requests to speak. And I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to give a fluff BS story and make it seem like it was all sunshine and roses and and every day was wonderful, and that's why I waited until I was 33 to come out publicly. So I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, and it's going to be real, it's going to be honest, and I started sharing struggle and humanizing it and dealing with my internal struggle as a queer person, my struggle with my mental health and well-being, suicide attempts and different things and struggles I had. And then the more I did it, I saw that people would come to me with struggle of their own, and it made me feel like, okay, I have to keep doing this because I'm now there's a relatability in that, and I think you touched on it earlier before we jumped on about, you know, we hear statistics, but we don't talk enough, we don't humanize issues. And doing that and being that person and having people come to you regularly with those struggles, and you're able to either be a shoulder or an ear or help them find support, is so incredibly rewarding, and, you know, the best thing I've ever done with my life. So I just have to, like, I can't stop now. Like, I just have to do it.
Mason, I'll go to you next. I've seen interviews. We've talked about this. When did you first decide to start sharing it?
So I didn't really decide. I wrote a poem for poetry class, and then I found out I have to give that poem to everyone in the class. Wow. I didn't read the instructions about the class very well, clearly. And then I was like, well, I guess we're doing this. And it kind of from there was like a thing, because it turns out you can't write about that and people not ask you, which I think is good, but it wasn't really like a conscious decision.
Yeah. What happened? What was kind of the result? Were people supportive, or did they know how to talk to you about it?
It was a lot of like, are you okay? Like, what do we do? Are you fine? Like, what is happening? Is this a metaphor, or is this not a metaphor? Like, are we worried? Like, there was just a lot of panic because they like didn't want to do the wrong thing, but they didn't know how to like do the right thing either. Yeah,
I very much understand that. We'll talk a little bit more about what some of the wrong things are that you've experienced and what some of the better things are. But Pangina, I read an interview that you did with Forbes where you started talking about being bullied, about self-harm. So when did you start sharing your story?
I think I was in most of the times when I spoke about my relation to self-harm, whether it was bulimia, whether it was drug addiction, or cutting, it was in front of a camera and it wasn't planned. But at that point, I had the conscious kind of like clicking moment where I was like, I just don't want to bullshit anymore. And I was just like, this is me. You're going to take all of what I am. I'm going to tell you the truth. This is what I've passed. This is what I had to overcome. This doesn't define who I am. And I just had it one day and I was like, well, this is my experiences. And hopefully if you know that I went through this and then I am here and I am doing what I love, maybe for other people, then they can get a little bit inspired or know that they're not just alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Adam, how about you?
So I was young when the suicidal thoughts really got bad, because being a born-again Christian, like hard and heavy, I was at church 4 days a week, there all the time, and then hitting puberty and realizing I don't like little girls. I like to hang out with them and play with them, but I don't like them. I like the boys. And when you kind of realize that, you reach this hideous moment where you start creating things in your head. And I realized that depression was partially something that my whole family has dealt with, but no one talked about it. And I didn't understand that when I'm starting to have these dark thoughts and I started getting to these low places where it was like, my whole family's Christian. They're obviously going to abandon me. What am I going to do? How do I survive this life? And only because it wasn't a real gun, am I even still here? Like, only because it had no firing pin, it was meant as a display weapon, am I even still alive? And I'm shaking, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, it gets, so as I got older and it changed and I started to change, I didn't know how to. There was this constant up and down, these hills, where when I was low, I couldn't understand like why. And when I was high, I was like, this is great. Life is great. I'm great. But then being gay, also being, I am a very tall person. I'm a very large person. I'm a big girl. I mean, I'm a big drag queen. Trying to understand that. And it was like drag kind of saved me. But even then thinking, oh, well, I'm a drag queen. Obviously everything's going to get better. No, it doesn't. Your problems never go away. You just have to learn with them. And it wasn't until, I would say, only recently, after multiple attempts to end my life, after this destructive behavior, that as I've gotten older, I'm like, okay, now's the time for me to actually seek help, get put on medications, talk to a therapist, be very open. Like, if I'm not telling you everything, if I'm not telling you the truth, then you can't learn from it. I can't help anyone if I'm holding it all in. It doesn't help anyone in the long term.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and you started to share, I think, what, you know, we're all talking about being more honest and genuine about it. I think one of the questions people often have that are outside of this experience is why, whether that's a suicide attempt, why is that the only option, or whether it's self-harm, why is that the release that you need? So I want, as best as you all can, you know, why, for those who don't understand it, why do you turn to some of those things? Brock, I think now you just became my, if there's several seconds of silence.
Okay. I was legit about to start speaking because of the silence. I just want to say I'm really happy that you're taking care of your well-being now.
Thank you.
And, you know, Adam, because that's pretty incredible. And I've been there. I know what that's like. And even to sit up here and talk about it right now, as you're just getting to the point that you're starting to work through it, is incredibly therapeutic and powerful, and you won't even know it yet, but it's going to take you deeper into it, from my experience at least. Why do people die by suicide? Why do people attempt? It just, for me, it just felt like, I think in some cases with certain mental illnesses or mental health struggles, there's no other, you're not in your frame of mind. In other situations, I think there just feels like no hope or despair, or it just feels so hopeless or full of despair that there's no other option, and that you can't, it's like you're almost drowning and you can't come up, and you can't pull yourself up, and you can't swim in, or you hit a wave or something, you just can't fight against it. And what do? You sink. And you feel like that's all you can do. You know, I don't know how or why I'm alive today. I really don't. And I've been asked that question. I've been asked that in a very intimate setting where somebody in my life died by suicide, and I was there when the family found it. And the person's mother said, "Why didn't you? Like, why didn't it?" I said, "I don't know." Like, not because, you know, she wanted me to or anything, but just because I couldn't grasp the situation. And I think there's so much that, you know, some of it's luck that I'm alive, and a fluke, and how didn't I die? And I ask myself that sometimes. But that hopelessness, that despair is like the lowest of the low. You feel like you've tried everything. Or I think sometimes in my case, I wouldn't actually look at myself. I wasn't ready to do the work to look at myself, and I didn't know how. So then at that point in time, it feels like there's nothing. It feels hopeless because you don't even know how to do the work to get out of that. You don't know how to swim. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk more about some of those things, like when you're in those moments now, what you've learned, what all of us have learned that we didn't know in those moments. But I want to keep giving others opportunity of, are there other reasons that, what does it either feel like or why do you attempt self-harm, etc.?
I think it's like a lot of what he said, like that you are kind of just like, I don't know what else to do. Like I had quite a few conversations with friends that when I was like at the worst of it, and they're like, how do we help? Like, what do you need? And it's like, I don't know. All I know is that like I think about this all the time. And if you think about something like 20 hours a day, like you can't not do it at that point. It's like, well, I'll just do it so I can stop thinking about it. And like that obviously is not a good system. Don't do that. But it's just like you have no other options. And like a lot of it is people like want to help, and like that there's like hotlines, but you're like, I don't know how this works. Like, do you just like call and it's like, hello, suicide hotline, we want to help you. What's going on? And you're just supposed to like explain everything. Like, what is that even like? So having like a phone number was like, okay, but I'm never gonna call people because I'm a millennial. I hate phone calls. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not knowing in the, even if you sometimes I know some of the things that are out there, but I just can't bring myself, I can't force myself to do anything else. So yeah, absolutely. Pangina, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think it's for me two things, control and pain. For me, in the first thing is when I felt that I wasn't in control of anything, because when I was younger, I was very overweight, and being gay and being the only son in my family, that was just a whole ball of itself, and I had problems dealing with that from friends and bullying. And so for me, why did I hurt myself is because I felt like I couldn't control anything. And at that point, for me to be able to control my life and to cut myself for some weird kind of rationalization, I felt that at least I can control this. At least I own my life. At least I own my body. And I feel like that's, for some people that I've talked to that has actually cut themselves, and they said that that's exactly the same thing that they're feeling as well. So that's one of the thing. And the other thing is when you feel so much pain, you just want it to end. And anything would feel better than the current pain that you're feeling at this point. So at that point, I was, doing these things because I felt like it'll take me away from the pain that I'm feeling that is intolerable at this point.
Yeah, I very much resonate with that. There's something mental about what the pain that I was experiencing, and to turn that into something more physical was the only thing I could see. I wanted to put up some of the alternatives to self-harm since we're talking about this, because I think it does a good job of showing some of the reasons people may self-harm and some of the alternatives. If those work for you, awesome. These are ideas that are listed on some of the online resources through the Trevor Project or others. Things like if you are trying to get out energy, dancing around like crazy in your house, if you have emotional pain that you don't know how to express, reaching out to a lifeline, texting a lifeline for those of us like me that would prefer that, reaching out to a friend, having a therapist. There are some options on there. I personally had a therapist who kind of the options she gave to me were a little bit more limited, and it was snap a rubber band around your arm or put ice on you, and to feel some kind of sensation if you're looking to feel a sensation. If that's an option that works, I still wanted to mention those. I don't know. They seemed outlandish to me. Snapping a rubber band is nowhere connected or is nowhere near kind of where I was at. I'm curious for you all, did you all get any bad or unhelpful advice or misconceptions when you talk to people about this? And Mason, you mentioned some people asked, "Are you okay?" but didn't necessarily know what to do. I'm curious both, what did they do, and do you have any options that you think would be better ways to support you?
We kind of talked about it, and I was like, you can't help with like the mental elements. Like, we're also 20, like you can't do that. And so it was a lot of like, I had one friend that would like bring me food or would just like text me and be like, okay, we're going to dinner right now and you're gonna show up because you haven't eaten all day because I know you. And so like things where it was like not about necessarily like them, they were still concerned, but it wasn't like we're gonna like have emotional conversations and like you're gonna cry and it's gonna be weird. Like it was more like, okay, well, we know you need help with all the things, and like here are simple things that like we can help with. Just like make sure your friends eat, and like make sure that like they go to their therapy appointments if they have a therapist. If they don't have a therapist, help them get a therapist. Very important.
I think that's great, because I think we forget about some of those basic things you can do to physically show up to people, bringing food. It's I am here, and here's something that can help. What other either misconceptions or helpful things have people found?
I found the bad advice I always got, which if you're so inclined, I mean, that's great. We'll pray. That'll fix all your problems. Okay, sure, yeah. And the people the people telling you to pray are the people that like are liars and cheats and adulterers. So it's like, oh, does wonders for you, huh? And I laugh about it now, but back then it was a dull pain that never went away. Mm-hmm. Everyone's like, oh, just find something to occupy your time. Okay. And so when you get the bad advice for so long, you start masking. When you're out, you put on your happy face, you do what you have to do, you sound happy, you sound cheerful, and then you go home and you lock yourself in a dark room and no one sees or hears from you for 12 hours. You don't leave, you don't move, you're dead to the world. And it becomes a numbness. So I always get those, like, when I was at my worst and people found out, it was like, that's so selfish of you. Like, why would you do this? And it's like, by that point in my mental state, none of you existed. I was numb. I was hollow. The only thing I had is the screaming voices in my head going, they'd be better off if you weren't here. Nobody cares. Tomorrow they'll all go about their days and nothing will change. Just you won't be here. Do them the favor. And those voices drowned out everything else. So everyone's like, oh, just fuck up. You'll be fine. That doesn't help. It doesn't help, because that voice is never going to be louder than the one in my head that knows me, that knows what my triggers are, what things to dig the knife in. But because I never really went out and asked for help, I didn't know what I was asking for. I put on a happy face and no one knew the difference.
Adam, I just want to add something to what you said, and it's all what I was thinking. No advice is better than bad advice. And you know what? None of us here are psychologists or psychiatrists. And yes, we have lived experience, but for people out there who haven't or are just masking their own struggles, giving advice or telling somebody to just suck it up or it's selfish kind of invalidates everything they're going through and will actually make it worse. So you're better off being a shoulder, an ear, a support, or just like I found early on when I was doing this work, people would come to me and I'd want to be so pressed to give them stuff to, and it's like, well, no, they're not there yet. Just slow down. Maybe I know some days I needed to stay in bed all day, and that's okay. And I need to recognize that that's all right. And telling people, well, just get up and do something. no, some days it's validate where they're at, and that will help them, feel seen and heard and recognized. And then from there, we can get to steps that actually, give them good advice. Therapy is great advice. Recognizing that, people go to therapy and they won't necessarily find the right therapist right away is also critical to know. So just pushing people to therapy and then they go and get a shitty therapist, because I've gone through 30, so I know. And, so it's just recognizing all these little things that we can give people tools, but they have to be able to use them. And we have to let them do it at their pace, but we can give them love and kindness, like those gestures your friends did. Those are so amazing. Those are so incredible and validating, and just come and be. And then if you didn't go, and it's not pressure, it can't be pressure. If you don't go, you don't go. But if you come and be, we love you.
Yeah, just to go off that a little bit, I find that sometimes just being in bed and allowing yourself to be in bed and forgiving yourself that it's okay to take the time for yourself is more helpful sometimes than forcing yourself to be in a situation where you would go and come back and it'll be worse. And I had to come to terms with that many times when I'm just like, today's not the day, I'm gonna be in bed, and tomorrow I might feel better, versus going out and then I'm bombarded with situations that cause me anxiety, and then I'll come back and I'm just like, now I need 2 days in bed. So I'm just going off what you guys say, and I feel like we need to just treat ourselves at a certain point, take better care of what we want than what other people want from us.
And the perception of what you need to be.
Yes.
Perception of what you need to be. Yeah, absolutely. My therapist told me once that when I was trying to wrestle, it was a simple question of just like, sometimes watching TV is helpful, and I'm just binge watching my show and I'm out of my head. Sometimes it's harmful because that's all I'm doing, and what's the difference? And she was talking about you'll feel it, and I thought that was silly because the idea of listening to my body felt so, I didn't understand how to do that or what that even meant. But then after she said it, I could feel it. I could feel the episode that I clicked on that was one too many, that now this has taken a turn from being useful and a distraction to me ignoring my problem. And so I, as someone who hated hearing this but needed to, listening to your body was very new to me.
Well, and it's even, you're talking about watching television, things like that. I found that as an introvert and having the introvert personality and the depression hand in hand, that like it wasn't just that you were watching something, it's watching something you've already watched before. Like,
that is always the key.
It's watching Golden Girls for the dozenth time because it's safe, it's happy, everything, you know what's going to happen, it's all going to be resolved by the end of the episode and everything's great. Where everyone's like, oh, have you seen this new show? No, I don't think I can mentally wrap my head around something. I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know what's going to happen. And that would give you anxiety. And you're just like, so even just sitting there watching TV, like sometimes you can't let yourself even just do that. It's like, I have to do something safe, something that I can control, something that I have that power.
That's so true. The amount of times I've watched Drag Race on repeat.
Yes.
Mine's Bob's Burgers. That's all. That's always in the background.
I'm a big, and I know you're not a fan of it, Kyle, but Star Trek, because in certain episodes through all the series, like it's a magical world where a lot of the problems that we think are here are gone, and then some problems that never go away, and it's just there's something very comforting about that. A future where stuff kind of worked out.
I want to ask, usually I would make fun of Star Trek because that's but here in this venue, I'm so happy that that's useful for you.
It's weird how the world works because Star Trek gives me anxiety.
I was thinking
the world, like different planets, everything brings me to a place where I get panic attacks, like this existential thing. And it's actually one of the things I've gone through, like treatments like exposure therapy, where I'd have to watch shows like Star Trek or look at like pictures of the world, different planets, to get over that anxiety.
Mine was zombies. Anything with zombies.
There you
Irrational,
go.
it makes no sense. But if it's zombies, it puts me on edge because it's the extreme that there's no control there. What do you do? You just lay down and die. Because that's where my brain goes. So no, I totally get it.
The being out of control, like that's another thing that was on those resources of sometimes self-harm is to be in control, and things like talking about it, watching TV shows you're comfortable, writing stories where you're in control, playing Dungeons and Dragons where you're in control of your character and what they do. Those are some of the suggestions they make to alternatives to feel like you're a little bit more in control.
I appreciate the fact that you have two drag queens, because there is that reinvention is so it has its therapeutic moments where things that Donna Suggarz would do are not anything that Adam would feel comfortable doing. Adam wouldn't get on a stage. Adam wouldn't kick and jive and do what he's got to do to earn the dollars. But Donna Suggarz isn't afraid of anything. So, I mean, and that it's like that kind of putting on your armor. Drag became an armor. But then if it's too much, then suddenly it becomes a crutch. So that's why I love the fact that you have two drag queens that are dealing with this, because that's certainly a part of it for me. I don't know. I'm not going to assume.
Yeah, Pangina, how does drag play into kind of your...
Completely. I mean, my whole name, Pangina Heals. I feel like when I'm performing, and whether I'm going through something, at that point, if I'm performing and I'm taking people out of, their world and into this fantasy of happiness for that short amount of time, I can heal other people, and in that time, I'm healing myself. Whether like I was breaking up with, most of the time they broke up with me. If someone broke up with me, let's just be real, and then I was really sad, I would put on heels and put on a dress, go outside, and let time heal me and the conversations I'll be having with other people. And for a short amount of time, it became an escape and a tool for me to know myself more and for me to resolve my problems. So it definitely helped me. But I think there is a misconception of drag queens of being happy people all the time, and we're always making sure we gotta be on, and we don't think of drag queens having depression or anxiety, but we're human too. So I think sometimes, like when I get in a setting where people are just like bombarding me with certain things, I just shut down and I have a panic attack and I can't breathe. And then a lot of the times when I didn't understand what it was. And so I was like, what is this? I'm not in control of my body. I'm hyperventilating without thinking. And a lot of the times the things that are not helpful that people are saying is like, oh, you're just over dramatic. Or it's really hot in here. There's no air conditioning. Or when I told my mom and my mom said, well, I deal with all my problems. I'm just like, well, that's not very helpful. Can we talk about this and be understanding of other people? Oh yeah, we're not going to go into my mother because we're going to be here a while. So
that's the next panel. That's the separate one we have lined up.
It's too long. This is really dark, so bear with me. Actually, when I told my mom about cutting, she was like, when I did it, I just stabbed myself. And I was like, how do I take this? I don't even know. She was like, yeah, just go through your thigh. You bleed more. And I was like, Mom, this is not helpful in any way, shape, or form. So I would say don't ask for help from a person who wouldn't suggest that.
We're going to stick with you for the rest of the time and just dive into this together. We're talking about, I think it's really useful talking about drag as both a way to manage and cope with this, also potential crutch. I want to talk about being queer very specifically. It's hard to parse through all the issues, because my depression, my gayness, my queerness, they all exist at the same time. So it's hard for me to understand what is what. But I still wanted to ask and see if you had any thoughts on, all of you, on how being LGBT contributes both positively or negatively to your mental health issues.
There's silence. Do you
Brock,
want me to talk?
It's up to
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
I could never
So
stop
first,
if you get me started. So go.
I just want to say it relates so much to what you're saying about being in drag, and it's really weird that I'm going to say this, but playing hockey on the ice, that was my drag. That's who you want to stage. So nothing else mattered in that moment. So everything else goes away. You know what I mean? So I really appreciate that and relate to it. And I think that's why I love drag so much. So in terms of, sorry, what were we talking about again?
We were talking about hockey is basically butch drag. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
How being queer, being gay contributed or helped any of your mental health issues growing up?
Well, I think it contributed to a lot of them. I mean, I was on a daily basis from the age of 7 years old in hockey locker rooms. I heard homophobic, homo-negative language that made me think I was bad or wrong and couldn't be myself. I suppressed it for a long time until I was 23. I was, from the age of 17 to 23, I drank every day. I was suicidal. I, on a number of occasions, tried to take my life. I was incredibly depressed. I had an anxiety disorder. I had it since I was 7. And I think I probably had some underlying depression, regardless if I was queer or not. I think that's something I deal with. But I think having this embedded in you that you're bad or wrong and you can't be yourself and do, like, my whole identity was being gay or being a hockey player. And then I have this duality, something that's polar opposite in my mind in the world I'm in. And I'm like, how do I navigate this? And it's all in my mind. Nobody knows. So I think the internalization of being queer really impacts mental health. Yeah. Because nobody knows until you tell people. And then when you tell people, you're waiting on a reaction from them. Because we, even today, we're taught to seek acceptance, which I think is a crock of shit, pardon my language. But I don't believe in acceptance because I think that creates hierarchies amongst people, and we're all equal. We don't need acceptance from anyone. So I think that really hurt me and really held me back, and that's why I struggled so much. But at the same time, it's helped me dissect the world differently. It's now my superpower. I see the world through a different lens than most of the people I engage with. And because of that, I'm able to think of things differently, have different reactions to things, be a little more empathetic and compassionate towards others, because I've dealt with so much, both my mental health and well-being and also being a queer person and the oppression we experience as that and the intersections of these different things. So it held me back in a sense in one aspect of my life, and played an integral role in me almost taking my life, but it also now is like, it's how I navigate the world, and it makes me the person I am.
Interesting. Mason, I'm curious if you've shared with me about going to conversion therapy, and you've talked about your religion. If you're willing to share a little bit more about that, that's a very uniquely LGBT experience.
Yeah, that was a time. I was how old, like 16 when that started. I was there till I was 18, by my own, not my own choice, but my parents didn't go to the church. It's a very weird situation. I have a whole podcast about it because it's weird. Listen to it. But a lot of it, I think, kind of tying it in with the other question, like I realized like being in the closet is what made my like mental health worse and like my self-injury worse as well. It's like when I was not out to anyone and going through that, because no one in the church knew I was going through that. I just learned this recently. Like only the leader that was doing it knew.
Wow.
So that's weird. But so there was like this extra secretive layer to it, and then like being kind of closeted. And then again, I kind of saw it in college when I figured out I was not binary, and then like the year that I waited for some reason to tell people was definitely like a rough time, because I was like, well, we don't have anyone at this point. Our group didn't have any like gender non-conforming people, and I was like, is that a thing? Like, is that going to be an issue? And it was just like not an issue, but nobody was out about it. But it was definitely like a very long time of like, I should tell them like now. And then they'd be like, oh, but we're too drunk, we can't do this now. Like, and it was just like a year of like every time I saw people being like, do they know? It's like, there's no way people know this if you don't tell them.
Yeah, and that's a long time of being in your head about something that you're not able to speak out loud. Yeah. Adam.
I think that for me growing up, because I've always been a bigger kid, I've always been taller than everyone else, bigger than everyone else. I've always kind of stuck out for that reason. When I finally started going out into the world and surrounding myself with gay people, I did not fit a mold that had been shoved down our throats a little bit, that had been really like, this is how a gay man's supposed to look. This is how he's supposed to act. This is what he's supposed to do. And I feel that like when growing up, even shows that like now I see them with different light. But like back then, you only see the fact that it's like sex and sexuality, those things so intertwined into each other, and then you realize, and it just was so destructive. And then you start like, okay, I got to go out to the club. Okay, I got to go, and that's how you meet people, and that's the life that you live. And then you go there, and it's just like, look at the fat guy, and okay, and then you're not having fun. I never had fun I genuinely never enjoyed going to a club. That's why I would just start drinking until I don't remember, like until you black out. And I did not realize that there were communities of people like me. I would rather stay home playing World of Warcraft. I'd rather stay home playing a video game. I'd rather play a board game, play Dungeons and Dragons. I would rather do those things. And in my mind, oh, that's a straight nerdy thing. There's no community, because I wasn't looking for it. Because I was so like, okay, hey, queer as folk, I've got to go out to the club. I've got to meet a man. I got to do this thing. And then you realize, I'm as gay as I am, as attracted to men as I am, I'm non-sexual. I'm asexual, except for I find men attractive. I just don't want to do anything with them. And when I came to that realization in my mid-20s, things started clicking, because you start realizing, was there something wrong with me? No, there was nothing wrong with me this whole time. It was all self-imposed by what people are telling me. It's just not my thing. And I finally had a doctor say, I'm like, well, you have chronically low testosterone. Okay, well, that'll fix all my problems. No, this could just be who you are. Depression is always going to be who you are. Anxiety is always going to be who you are. Managing it. You're going to go out and find someone, get married, have kids, enjoy that sexual life. No, that if you want to. And then finding a community as you get older. As I've gotten older, the LGBT community has become a community that I love, because I found people in it that were like me. And I found like acceptance and love and friendships that I never had growing up, because they didn't know to look for them. Sorry, it's a lot. I can't. Once I start, I can't stop. I apologize.
No, I could go into a whole separate thing about the issues that queer as folk gave me about my expectations, but I mean, we're talking about things that we don't talk about enough in the LGBT community. The amount that sex plays into the expectations for a gay person, the idea that if you have sexual attraction, that it doesn't have to look a certain way. You don't even have to have sexual attraction. You can be ace, arrow. There's so many different ways to be gay. So I really appreciate that you brought that up as well.
Well, not even realizing I couldn't figure out what the name was, because I was like, oh, I would say I was asexual, and they're like, but you're attracted to men. you're not asexual. It's like, oh, okay, well, so then even the asexuals were saying, well, you don't fit in our community. And then, okay, so then I found it was what, a koi sexual? You feel attraction, but no urge to act upon it. Okay, that sounds about right. That's the box I'll check. Where's the form?
I feel like you're preaching to the choir. I'm like, people need to start stopping putting other people in boxes to make themselves feel comfortable. How about that? Because I can be whatever I want to be if that's who I am and I'm comfortable with it. And don't pressure me into putting in a little mold. And a lot of it, I feel like I'm blaming the media in Thailand. The media is very homophobic, and it teaches me because I don't see other people like me in the media when I was younger because I was, overweight. And so for me being overweight and gay, that becomes, in my mind, a problem because I can't see someone like me. And therefore, if I don't have a six-pack, I am worthless. And that's why I feel like because I don't fit those molds, somehow I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be good enough. And at a certain point, when I went to LA, I had these two roommates who I called them super gays because they were so unapologetic. They would just one day just shave their legs, put on heels, and just went to class. And I learned something really powerful about that is that they lost the ability to give a shit. And I found that to be a really great lesson in life.
I wish I'd gotten it earlier. It didn't really hit me that lesson until I was in my 30s, and then I realized all that crap I was worried about in my 20s and my teen years is garbage.
Hey, man.
You know what the biggest mind-boggling aspect of what you're talking about here is that those gays that fit that mold or that act that way, it's a numbing mechanism. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like they're numbing too, and then they're part of it is being a mean gay and putting others down to feel good. It's instant gratification. It's the same way we use sex, same way we use drugs and alcohol and everything else. Instead of dealing with our shit. It's why I have the show with Miss Kasha Davis with Wow Presents Plus, and it's called This Is Shit. It's all about dealing with your shit because we all have it and we need to deal with it. And the sooner we do and learn ways and tools to do so, which is what we're doing right now, which I think is so incredible, the better we'll be and the happier we'll be. And we don't have to fit. Like, I fucking hate that I look like, because I was a professional athlete, I look like those gays that oppress other people in it. Like, so I'm like, people look at me like standoffish, and I'm like, no, like, let's just chill and have a good time. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like let's just exist and love and support and embrace and celebrate. And that's the queer world we need. That's how we uplift one another. That's how we, you know what I mean? Instead of oppressing, when the oppressed become the oppressors, that's and that happens a lot in our community. There's a hierarchy that's been put in place, and to Pangina's point, I think it's from the media. And even in North America, we have at the beginning, it was only safe to have masculine presenting gay men in media or hypersexual looking people in media, or straight people were only comfortable highlighting that type of gay person or queer person. So it all played into it, right? And it's
gay
stupid.
And that's the gay community at times is gay Animal Farm. The pigs have become the farmers. That's a reference that not everyone will get. I'm sorry.
Or a lot of people will claim that they have read and haven't actually.
I had to read it in school. I'm sorry. I'll never forget it.
Well, we are out of time. I feel like I could talk to you all for so much longer. But what I want to do is share your socials for everyone to. I think it's so important to be able to see other people that struggle with these things and what they're doing and follow. So please stay in touch and follow all the panelists that you've seen here today. I want to give everyone a second to, if there's anything you haven't yet been able to express that you want to, now's the time. And also share how people can outside of your socials, how people can continue to stay in touch with you and what to look out from you. Pangina, I'll start with you.
Well, thank you for having this. I think it's so incredibly healing for me just to hear your stories as well, and it really helps me. And hopefully today, all the audience is listening. I hope it helps you in some way, shape, or form. And my socials are all Pangina Heals all across the board. And just look out for me in the world.
Awesome, thank you. Mason, I'll turn over to you next.
Okay. Thank you for this, first of all, and I hope that everybody learned something somewhat helpful, at least. I know there's it's a lot to process in a very kind of short amount of time. You can find me on Twitter at MasonTaylor94. It is open now. I'm gonna lock it again because I don't want my parents to find my Twitter. But you can add me. I'll add you back. It's fine as long as you're not my parents. I don't care. And yeah, I'm working on the podcast. It kind of took a break for a minute, but it's gonna come back. And yeah, there's a link tree in my Twitter, so you can find all the things there.
Awesome. Adam, how about you?
You can find me. Easiest way is donnasuggarz.com. It takes you to my Podbean for my podcast. All my social medias are linked there. I totally get that podcast. Sometimes you need a break because even the podcast can be too much. But I'm just getting myself back into my swing of it, and I'm always interested in people following me on social medias, but I also get a lot of weird requests. So if you're going to add me, just shoot me a message. Don't just send a blind ad. Just say like, hey, I heard you on this thing and I think you're great. Okay. Or, hey, you seem interesting. Just anything other than like a blind ad. So I know that you're not a bot.
Star Trek, D&D. These are some things we can lead with.
Yeah.
Brock, how about you?
Yeah, so first I want to let everyone know if you are struggling, you need somebody to talk to, don't hesitate. My DMs are open. People reach out regularly if you need a shoulder or an ear or some resources in your area. I don't mind helping in any way I can. Have some fun things coming up. I can't spoil any of them yet, but you'll be able to see them on my socials. My Instagram is BrockMcGillis33, and my Twitter is at Brock_McGillis.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to everyone. Thank you for talking about these. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being amazing role models that we need more of in the world. So I appreciate all the panelists for being here.
Thank you.
All right. I do want to change gears a little bit now. If you are watching this link online later, there will be links to the socials for all of the panelists in that description. Also, I'm going to now air the documentary that I created. And again, if you're watching later, you can get a link to that in the description box down below. But I, like all the panelists we heard from, was trying to figure out some way to get these thoughts that I had out of my head and make them tangible. And for me, creative things like writing and filmmaking are the ways that I do that. So I didn't necessarily initially plan to do this, and just kind of ended up happening. I will have a Q&A with Mike Johnson after this to tell a little bit more about the documentary, but for now, I want to turn over to the documentary. Keep in mind there are very graphic scenes that may not be right for everyone, so please take care of yourself before watching. But we'll go ahead and play that now.